Hello everyone and welcome back to the O-Crit D&D Ravion campaign. Last time we left off, our party had left the elven village of Thala in the deep wood of the intermediary region between the Grassbend, Lochland, and Snowwatch regions. And making their way over the day's travel to the city of Fargard, the party fought a troll, were chased by cultists, and seemingly marked for death for their troubles by the cult of Phobos. Now the party slowly stirs awake in the comfort of their warm and safe rooms within the Jade Goblet Tavern and Inn. Notably, before they awake, Sudi had a dream over the course of the evening. Standing in a deep void, she saw two statues. One of the Crimson Tactician, stern and cold even still. The other, the Scarlet Maiden with a gentle smile on her face. Hearing a soft weeping from behind the Tactician's statue, Sudi snuck her way around the edge of the structure, seemingly unnoticed by what appeared to be the Tactician herself, that knelt, bleeding from a wound on her chest, as she cried hot, angry tears of pain and hate. In an attempt to help, Sudi cast Cure Wounds, touching the Tactician on her shoulder, trying to heal the wounded goddess even slightly. The Tactician, however, whirled on her like an angry wolverine, spitting and cursing as she looked Sudi in the eyes. "I don't need your fucking help," she hissed angrily, blood curling from the edge of her mouth. "What makes you think I need you?" she said before whirling around and walking off into the darkness. It was then that Sudi awoke in her chambers at the Jade Goblet Tavern and Inn. Serenity, though, had a dream as well. In this dream, she was standing in a well-lit, comfortable office of the gnomish man from the city of Fallfield that, in a past dream, had lunged forward, putting a black spot onto her hand. The gnomish man now stood off to the side, pouring them both a drink before beckoning for her to sit across from his desk, where he made himself comfortable. He spoke with her about information on a certain individual in her group, a purple-eyed Jade Ravenclaw. He hoped to convince her to pass the black spot on to Jade, and in return, he would leave Serenity alone. Determined to think on it, Serenity awoke in her room in the inn, with the thoughts of the previous night's dream, and this meeting with this gnomish man swimming in her mind. Awaking and preparing for the day otherwise, Lothric ran to the kitchen to purchase breakfast for himself in his roommate Lemba while she slept in. Running into X as she took her opaline tortoise out to graze in the warm morning air for a bit. At the same time, as the party independently got ready, they gathered out in the road outside of the tavern before making their way off towards the tradesman's cart general store to gather whatever supplies were available. On the road, they did notice a couple of young men walking in the same direction and seeming to have their attention on Jade as they walked. Falling back into step with them, X tried to intimidate them in an effort to keep them from harassing Jade or anybody else in her party. But her attempts fell on simple ears, as the more oafish of these teenagers seemed to miss her meaning. Hurrying on to the shop, the party collected what supplies they could, eagerly searching for magical items that the more practical-based Goliath shopkeeper had in form of these minor traded trinkets from past merchant caravans. Jade was able to find and purchase what appeared to be an old spell book, while X bought a book on dragons, and Lothric bought a new set of scale mail armor, selling his studded leather in return. The two young men spotted counting out coins to purchase the Wand of Smiles from the shopkeeper as the rest of the party hit the road to continue their trek to the city of Moonshade. Walking their way down the long and winding road through the mossy yet vibrant forest of the Malakran Magocracy for this northern temperate rainforest, the party came to an overlooking ridge and took a moment to enjoy the view of a wide open gravel plain crisscrossed with cool flowing rivers that wound across and through each other. A long wooden boardwalk serving as this roadway stretched across these rivers like a well-kept splinter across the valley, sat in stark opposition to the wilderness around it. As the party moved on, Sudi stood at the overlook a moment longer, a vision coming to her as she stood there. Standing once again in the void with the two statues of the goddesses, she knew Sudi heard this time a pained grunt and then a sigh from behind the Scarlet Maiden's statue. Hoping to sneak behind the statue once again, Sudi confidently snuck around the edge, but her foot caught the edge of the stonework at the base of the statue itself, causing her to fall forward onto the ground. Gently, a hand reached down and helped her up, and as she looked into the kind face of the Scarlet Maiden, they spoke for a moment, the Scarlet Maiden now waving her hand to remove them from the darkness of the void in favor of brighter surroundings. Finding herself now on the rise that she had been standing on with her party before the vision occurred, Sudi stood with the goddess as they looked out over the river valley below them. They spoke for a moment about what Sudi needs. What does she need to be happy? Sudi saying that what she needs to be happy is to return home. She misses home. She wants to go back. The Scarlet Maiden, smiling, affirmed this feeling, encouraging her to pursue what makes her happy, before the dream ended and Sudi had to rush to catch back up with the party. Lothric, in an effort to rejoin Sudi, used his Phase Step ability, appearing in a puff of dried and colorful autumn leaves in front of her with a smile, as, with a reactionary impulse, Sudi threw a rock at the suddenly appearing Lothric, missing and instead hitting Serenity in the back. Annoyed, Serenity turned back to their journey after shooting Sudi a glare. But even then, Lothric successfully charmed Sudi with this Autumn Eladrin Phase Step, and took advantage of this occurrence to talk with her about this daydream that she had just experienced. He spoke with her about her meaning and what she wants. She affirmed to him that she would love to return home, but she's not sure how other than to claim revenge. Arriving at the gravel field and at the base of the boardwalk, the party continued their journey now across the river floodplain. Gravel crunching beneath their feet as they made their way the few yards before the walkway replaced the crunching with the creak of old, damp wooden planks. As the party made their way across these many cold rivers, they spotted a large, furry creature foraging as it waded in the cool water upstream. Dropping low in an attempt to remain hidden from what they recognized as an owlbear, unfortunately, in all of their best attempts, the group's stealth ability was lackluster, and the owlbear noticed them. Roaring, it rushed forwards towards them as Sudi cast the spell Command, forcing it to flee. The remainder of the party got into position on their turns. Lothric fired his crossbow, sending a bolt thudding deep into the creature's shoulder, as Lemba burst out her Nephilim wings that resembled a foggy or misty set of feathered wings, leaping into the air as she cast a scorching ray, slamming the flames into the furred monstrosity. Halting its charge, the owlbear then turned to flee, following the command spell, spending its full movement to rush away from the party. Seizing the opportunity, the party turned tail themselves, rushing off down the boardwalk away from the creature to escape the danger. Sudi, using her invoked duplicity, had created a copy of herself across the river by the owlbear on a rock, and as the party escaped, the owlbear returned and attacked the illusion, slamming its head painfully into the rock beneath it, discouraging it from any additional pursuit. Traveling the remainder of the day, the party reached the end of a long boardwalk and the bottom of a mountain pass that the road would have continued up. Pausing for a moment, they thought they heard another person around them, but they couldn't find anything. And searching for a place to stay for the evening as they were losing the light, Lemba found a cave, and as much of the party set up camp for the evening, Sudi and X went off into the forest to forage for supplies. With the help of Serenity's Find Familiar spell, they were able to connect some limited uh, collect some limited berries and a couple of large trout from the rivers. Serenity, back at camp, sought the opportunity to speak telepathically with Jade through a message spell and Jade's own psionic abilities, telling her about the gnomish man from her dream and what he had wanted her to do, though reassuring Jade that she had no intention of doing what he wanted. The party then united around the campfire, sat and ate their meal, as they made shadow puppets against the wall of the cave with the flickering firelight. Over the course of the evening's watch, as the party found rest for the evening, they continued their shadow puppets. Jade and Sudi, enraptured with their shadow puppet endeavors, completely missing when one of the two young men from back in the town snuck to the edge of their campfire and dropped a fist-sized ball of thickly wrapped twine into the flames. Their shift over with a simple feeling of dread sitting like a heavy stone in their gut, Sudi and Jade woke up Lothric and Lumba, who did notice a ball of twine within the flames, and as Lothric reached for it, deeper inside of the cave, Jade casts a new spell to enter the dream of Sudi Vagnasia for the evening. As Lothric pulled the ball of twine from the fire and Lumba extinguished the flame, Lothric, holding this ball in his hand, began to unwind it. Startled as he neared the end of the roll, he realized and released a fistful of dark red powder into the air of the cave, creating a thin red cloud of mist or fog that settled over the party in their sleep. Lothric and Lumba, awake at the moment, suffered from hallucinations of their greatest fear, as the Phobos powder took its hold. Lothric saw his husband rushing out from the darkness of the forest, and just gently out into the firelight, as a look of fear on his face, and his 3 bolts slammed into his back. Falling forward with blood trickling from his mouth, he crawled forward desperately before being dragged out into the darkness with a scream. Lemba, in her hallucination, looked around and saw the members of her party not as they were, but as charred corpses of themselves, killed by a flickering flame in her hand. As these two struggled with the influence of the Phobos powder, Sudi had a final dream with these two goddesses. Standing once again in the dark void, shadowed by the dream projection of Jade, as she had entered her dream, Sudi stood once again before the 2 statues of the goddesses. This time the Crimson Tactician held a dagger to her own chest, the flesh carved into the shape of her holy symbol, her face a disdainful grimace with her eyes following Sudi wherever she moved. The Scarlet Maiden knelt down on one knee with her hand outstretched in aid, with a kind smile on her face. Struggling with her decision, Sudi tried to reach out to each goddess, only receiving a feeling one way or the other with no clear answer other than the movements of the statues when she wasn't looking. Spotting Jade in her dream, she spoke with her for guidance on this decision. Does she follow the tactician even still in hopes of revenge and a return home? Or is the cost that the tactician takes, the anger, the hatred that she holds for mortals, too much for even Sudi to abide by? Eventually, the hate of the tactician outweighed the potential benefit that she provided. Sudi hung the blade of the red veil onto the arm of the statue, the golden blade tarnishing with rust pockets, as if it had been neglected for years. Turning to the Scarlet Maiden, she weighed the gravity of her decision before waking up. As the party slowly came to consciousness, they were no longer in the cave. They were bound at their hands and feet, being dragged through the woods by the 2 young men from Fargard that had been watching Jade very intently. Tied to stakes, the party found themselves bound with a few other people to poles in the ground. Hooded figures and a few young men stood in this wide, dark clearing under the moonlight, with stone braziers surrounding a wide, deep pit in the ground. Before the pit, a large stone altar covered in red bloodstains sat and as the hooded figures moved through the darkness around them, Sudi heard a voice in her head, the voice of an old colleague from the Serac Wastes. Sudi, we need a meeting of the hands. A champion to the goddess rises. Bring only those you trust to Spiritport by the 29th of Sunis. Via the sending spell, one of the leading hands of the Crimson Tactician had reached out to her. And so Sudi responded. Might be hard. Help a girl out. Trouble between Farguard and Moonshade. Dear Skull Fanatics, have something wonderful to report if you have golden hands. This is where we're going to leave off for the Session 13 part of the Ravihan campaign. We'll see how they handle this apparent abduction by this cult. So, stay tuned for Session 14, for the Session 14 recap. And remember, subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified when we do put that video out. If you think you might have some more insight given the ciphers so far, leave your answers down in the comments and we'll see what you come up with. Say I'll respond and see whoever might be the closest. So, thank you all once again for tuning in. Remember, it just doesn't take that much to make a difference out there in the world. So be the difference that you want to see. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next video. Bye.